Picture this, a hidden chamber deep beneath the Egyptian desert, where time itself seems to stop. A young boy sits on a throne, barely old enough to understand the world, yet wielding power over life and death. What you're about to hear is a story that official history never recorded. A tale of fear, control, and secrets buried in honey and stone. Are you ready to uncover the darkness that even the pharaohs tried to hide? Official records say Pepesu, known later as Pepe, became pharaoh at the age of 6 after his father died suddenly. His older brother should have inherited the throne, but in the shadowed corridors of power, ambition is more lethal than any sword. Pepe was barely old enough to hold a flail, yet from the very first day, everyone in the palace understood one thing. This child was not like other children. He learned fast, faster than anyone expected. While other 6-year-olds played, Pepe learned the language of power. He understood fear, loyalty, and manipulation before he could even form proper sentences. His mother and the regent, Kisan Pepe, did not guide him. They molded him. Every smile, every gesture, every lesson was designed to shape him into a god walking among mortals. By the age of 10, Pepe could read the ambitions in a courtier's eyes like simple hieroglyphs. By 12, he could orchestrate the downfall of a man without uttering a single word. The palace itself became his classroom. Courtyards, hidden passages, and private chambers taught him more than any tutor ever could. And the servants, they learned quickly that the slightest mistake could mean death, or worse, a lifetime of being invisible to the God King who watched everything, understood everything, and answered to no one. While the world saw a divine boy king, the palace hid a far darker reality. Beneath the golden halls and carved statues, secret chambers whispered with fear. Here, Pepe discovered the intoxicating taste of absolute control. It began innocently, or so it seemed. Noblemen brought honey as tribute. Surrogates, young, unblemished, and expendable, were brought into hidden rooms. Honey was poured over them in slow, deliberate streams, while priests chanted ancient words. Each ritual was precise, each movement calculated, and Pepe watched, learning how fear, ritual, and spectacle could bind people to his will. These ceremonies weren't just private indulgences. They were lessons. They taught everyone in the palace, noble and servant alike, that Pepe's power was absolute. His gaze alone could elevate or destroy. His whim could reward or condemn. By the time he was 16, Pepe understood that life itself could be manipulated, measured, and even taken to serve his obsession with control. As Pepe matured, the honey rituals evolved from secret indulgences into displays of absolute authority. The surrogates became more carefully chosen, the ceremonies more elaborate, and the nobles more deeply entangled in his system of power. Honey was no longer just a sweet substance. It was a symbol of influence. Those who served it faithfully were rewarded with wealth, favor, and protection. Those who resisted or hesitated were reminded of their mortality and the fragility of their status. The pharaoh's whims became law, and the rituals were proof that he alone dictated life, death, and devotion. The palace became a theater of obedience. Living sculptures of honey-coated humans, carefully posed, performed silently as nobles observed, their reactions catalogued, measured, and used to secure loyalty. Each display reinforced the message: Pepe was not merely king, he was God incarnate, and all others existed to reflect, honor, and feed his power. Through ritual and spectacle, Pepe mastered the art of domination. Fear was crafted into a currency, obedience became ritualized, and the line between divinity and tyranny blurred. The honey, golden and viscous, became the conduit of control, a medium that connected desire, devotion, and dread in one intoxicating cascade. While the pharaoh immersed himself in ritual and spectacle, a hidden network began to form within the palace walls. Slaves, servants, and laborers, those thought invisible, began to communicate through glances, gestures, and coded words. They observed the routines, the guard rotations, the secret passages, and the hidden honey chambers. Carl, a young and educated slave captured during a southern campaign, became the heart of this clandestine network. He taught others how to read the palace like a map, how to anticipate danger, and how to exploit the cracks in the king's all-seeing gaze. They shared stories of injustice, whispered history of cruelty, and planned subtle acts that could undermine the pharaoh's grip. The nobles, meanwhile, remained entangled in Pepe's web. Their wealth, status, and survival depended on obedience, on reading the signals correctly, on reinforcing the illusions of divinity. The line between collaborator and conspirator blurred, as even minor gestures of defiance could result in death or ruin. In this palace, power was a living organism. It flowed through corridors, circulated in the rituals, and was reinforced by fear, reward, and secrecy. But for every system Pepe constructed to maintain control, there were invisible threads weaving resistance. And within those threads lay the seeds of the first rebellion, waiting for the right moment to grow. The plan had been forming for years. Carl and his core group of trusted slaves had mapped the palace in exhaustive detail. They knew every hidden passage, every guard rotation, every weak point in the fortress of privilege. On a night chosen for its darkness, 60 slaves moved like shadows through the palace. Small groups took separate routes, avoiding or quietly neutralizing guards, wielding hammers, knives, and tools repurposed as weapons. They weren't aiming to overthrow the kingdom. They were aiming for one goal: to reach the honey chambers and shatter the illusion of invincibility surrounding Pharaoh Pepe. Inside the chamber, the ritual was underway. Surrogates stood trembling on obsidian platforms, honey pouring like molten gold. Priests chanted in an ancient tongue. Incense filled the air, and Pepe watched from his cedar throne, his expression detached, lost in his own private reality. The moment of attack struck like a wave. Karl's primal cry echoed through the chamber, breaking the spell of the ritual. Slaves surged forward. Chaos erupted. Priests scattered. Jars shattered. Honey covering the floor like liquid fire. Guards clashed with rebels. Amidst the confusion, the boy surrogates were rescued, carried to safety by those willing to risk everything. Pepe, for the first time in decades, felt vulnerability. He had ruled through fear, spectacle, and ritual, but the machinery of oppression could be interrupted. Though the slaves could not kill him, they had shown him, and the nobles, that gods could bleed, that even the most entrenched power could be challenged. The uprising was brief, but historic. Lives were lost, sacrifices made, and the palace would never be the same. In the aftermath, whispers spread through Memphis and the surrounding compounds. Resistance was possible. Justice, even in small acts, could exist. The seeds of defiance had been planted, ready to grow in the shadows where the Pharaoh's golden light could not reach. Pepe's reign continued, though nothing was ever quite the same. The honey rituals persisted, more secretive, deeper underground, guarded with layers of checkpoints. The nobles and priests adapted, calculating differently, realizing even a god could be momentarily shaken. In the slave compounds, stories of the failed uprising became legend. Karl and his allies survived, passing their knowledge to the next generation. They taught that tyrants bleed, that even the most entrenched systems of power have weak points, and that resistance is possible, even in silence. The Pharaoh aged subtly, his energy waning, his obsessions remaining, but no longer unchallenged. Administrators ran the kingdom while he withdrew further into private chambers. Life in Egypt went on. Monuments still rose, and the empire thrived. But behind the scenes, the machinery of oppression was no longer unquestioned. The honey chambers, once symbols of absolute domination, were eventually abandoned and forgotten. Surviving records were destroyed, ensuring that history would remember Pepe as a long-ruling, powerful pharaoh. But not the darkness he cultivated, the lives sacrificed, and the human cost of his immortality obsession. Yet the stories persisted. In the Delta villages, beekeepers whispered about the mad pharaoh who sought eternal life through sweetness. Among the slaves and servants, tales of courage and defiance passed through generations, hidden but never extinguished. The lesson remained clear. Absolute power corrupts, and even gods can fall. Sweetness can conceal poison. Authority can mask cruelty. And no reign, no matter how long or golden, is beyond judgment. History may forget the details, but memory survives in stories, and stories carry the truth no official record dares to show. Pepe's final years were marked by isolation. His body grew frail, though his obsessions never waned. The honey rituals, once frequent spectacles of control, became rare, secret events. Administrators ran the empire efficiently, while Pepe retreated deeper into his chambers, surrounded by the few loyal servants who had outlasted decades of his reign. At the age of 94, Pepe died quietly. Officially, it was old age. Unofficially, whispers suggest he passed during one last ritual, his heart finally giving out amid the trappings of the power he had hoarded. With his death, the empire faced a crisis of succession. Designated heirs were long gone, and noble factions vied for power. Civil unrest threatened the stability of Memphis, though the oppressed outside the palace walls quietly celebrated in their own ways. The honey chambers were sealed and eventually forgotten. Records were destroyed or lost. To the world, Pepe was remembered as a long-reigning, ambitious pharaoh. But the stories that survived told another truth: the human cost of his obsessions, the subjugation of countless lives, and the shadow of tyranny that extended far beyond the palace walls. Yet, from the tales passed down among servants, laborers, and survivors, one lesson endured: power may seem absolute, but no god or king can escape mortality. The faint echoes of resistance and courage remind us that even the longest reigns end, and history ultimately belongs to those who remember and tell the truths that others try to erase. This is the story history rarely tells: the hidden cost of power, the secrets behind grandeur, and the shadows cast by ambition unrestrained. Pepe Saku may be gone, the honey chambers buried, and the pharaoh's reigns remembered in monuments and records. But the whispers of what really happened survive. If these dark histories fascinate you, leave a like, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. Every story has a ripple, and the echoes of this tale remind us: absolute power is never without consequence, and even gods of legend must eventually face the truth. Remember, history isn't just what's recorded, it's what survives in whispers, in the forgotten, and in those brave enough to tell it.